average people started to play a larger role in the election of 1824, which featured four major candidates in one of the most controversial elections of the century. Keep in mind that there were not political parties as we know them today, but this election convinced me that the U.S. political system needed them. This was the first election the U.S. ever had that did not feature a member of the founding father generation. The candidate that most closely represented the old guard Virginia dynasty of Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, etc. was William Crawford. He was the favorite of political insiders, but did not have much appeal among the larger public. Unfortunately for him, a stroke late in the election season took him out of contention. John Quincy Adams represented Northeastern interests. From Massachusetts, the son of John Adams, he could also lay claim as a descendant of the founding father generation. He was a very competent diplomat, having gone with his father to France as a boy and working for diplomats when he was as young as 17. He was a brilliant man, one of the smartest people to ever run for president or be president. Other than English, he spoke French and Dutch fluently and could converse in German and Russian as well. He had translated works by Virgil and Aristotle to English before he entered Harvard University, where he graduated as a lawyer. He began practicing law in Boston, then got into Massachusetts politics for a while, worked as a professor at Brown University, and at age 42 in 1809, he was appointed as the first minister. Essentially, that's what they used to call ambassadors. Terminology was different then, and the ranking was somewhat different then based on the U.S.'s status at that point. But in any case, he was appointed first minister to Russia by President James Madison in 1809. He became Secretary of State under President James Monroe and was widely considered to be one of the most competent people to ever hold the Secretary of State position up to that time. Adams supported the American system, but he was ambiguous when he discussed tariffs. He generally supported the U.S.'s commercial interests, but in a way that tended to favor New England. He was also the first candidate that, while not opposed to it publicly, in private admitted that he did not approve of slavery. In public, he didn't say much about slavery, but he tended to avoid the subject and not say much good about it. Henry Clay represented the West, the new part of the country, as a member of the House of Representatives from Kentucky. He was also considered to be very competent. In 1811, he was the youngest Speaker of the House of Representatives, was excellent at fashioning political compromises, and was the most famous spokesperson for the American system, and also promoted America's expansion westward. Clay's problem was that his support for the American system pleased some people a little bit and no one a lot. So voters in New England and New York opposed federal funding for Western projects that would not benefit them, and Southerners did not like his support of high tariffs at all. Who most observers expected to win was the war hero Andrew Jackson. He had only recently been appointed by the Tennessee legislature as a senator in 1822. Jackson was a much more popular representative of the Western states and the common man, as he called them. In fact, Jackson pretty much ran on those themes without explaining how they would actually apply to his presidency. He was the man of the people, he said. A man of the people, for the people, and he was a war hero with a strong, assertive personality. That was all he needed to say. He would handle the country's affairs the way he handled Pakenham at New Orleans and the Seminoles in Florida. Oh, and by the way, Florida is part of the U.S. now. You're welcome. So the outcome of the vote was very sectional. Jackson, indeed, garnered the most votes. He won the popular vote by almost 50,000 votes, or about 12%. However, no candidate won a majority in the Electoral College. There's a constitutional mechanism to deal with that scenario, which is for the House of Representatives to vote between the candidates, with each state's delegation voting as one. This was very embarrassing for Henry Clay, who came in fourth, and thus was not viable. But he was Speaker of the House, and had influence over legislators voting between Adams and Jackson. Clay did not personally like either Adams or Jackson, but he thought Jackson was an idiot and dangerous, and he was known to have said things like, slaughtering 2,500 people in New Orleans is no qualification for the presidency. So Clay used his influence to throw support toward Adams in the House, who won with 13 state delegations voting for him to Jackson's 7 and Crawford's 4. We don't have direct evidence of any backroom deals, but it certainly looked like there was one to the public, because after John Quincy Adams became president, he appointed Henry Clay as his Secretary of State, which was an office that was seen to lead directly to the presidency. The more likely reason for that was because Adams truly believed Clay was the most competent choice. Jackson, even before the vote in the House, had been ranting that there would be a corrupt bargain, as he called it, to subvert the will of the people. When Adams won and Clay became Secretary of State, Jackson screamed, "I told you so." He called Henry Clay the Judas of the West and vowed to run again in 1828. Essentially, he never stopped running for president and charged that Adams was not legitimate the entire 4 years. An enduring legacy of this era is the continuing effort of politicians to appeal to the common person. With changes to voter eligibility rules, more adult males were able to vote after 1824 than in any prior elections which featured property qualifications. This fundamentally changed the way politicians communicated with their constituents. Jackson also ran mostly on his personality. He did not offer very many specific policy proposals as a candidate, nor would he discuss policy unless asked to, and when he was asked to discuss serious issues, he would always circle back to either his war record or his common man roots. Even though he was a lawyer, there were rumors that Andrew Jackson did not even read or write well. And it's true he was not formally educated, and it showed. It was easier to be a lawyer on the frontier than a lawyer in Boston or New York. You've obviously got less competition. At one campaign rally, supporters of both candidates, Adams and Jackson, were heckling each other, and one Adams supporter yelled, "At least Adams can write." A Jackson supporter countered that by yelling, "But Jackson can fight," which was clearly the more important quality to the common man, average Americans. That exchange got picked up in Southern newspapers, and Jackson actually used it as a slogan later on. And you'd see, signs at Jackson rallies saying, "Adams writes and Jackson fights." We can see some of this Jacksonian influence in recent elections.